The Hoi 4 modding rabbit hole has definitely hit a new level with people making Cold War alt history mods based on World War II alt history mods. Kalterkrieg takes place in the Kaiserreich timeline, where in its canon, the Entente and Reichspakt unified to defeat the Third Internationale, while in the east, Russia stalemated against the Germans and peaced out. Obviously, the alliance between the Reichspakt and Entente wasn't gonna last, so a Cold War was inevitable. Now, from just looking at the map, I'm not gonna lie, there are some really weird calls. America is split into 4 pieces, with the American Union state being dominant, and it just makes me think of those maps of what a balkanized China could be and how stupid they look. It really does hit different when it's your own country getting that treatment. Also, somehow, China beat Japan without any substantial help, when the Japanese had significantly fewer enemies. Anyways, only a few nations have content for this release, so I decided to play as Germany since I figured they would have some of the most interesting content for me. And well, I was in for quite the ride. The mod has us start right after the end of the Second Weltkrieg, with the Union of Britain surrendering due to Germany dropping a nuke on it. Our focus tree starts with us beginning the post-war reconstruction, and it looks pretty meaty with a lot of stuff to go through. Of course, since the mod takes place in late 40s and 50s, the tech tree is changed up and expanded to fit in the time period. We even got some new tech categories for the spicy weapons, but I don't get why researching flamethrowers makes the entire world dislike me. This is such a strange timeline. Nuking a city? Well, just had to be done. There was nothing else Germany could do, but shooting a small stream of fire? Alright, war criminal, I hope God has mercy on you, because we won't. In the decisions menu, we got mechanics for the Bundesrat and Reichstag, which are for when we need to get support to pass laws on our focus tree. There is also a timer for us to create a new state within Germany. Although we may have won the Second Weltkrieg, people believe the libs made it a lot harder. So a group of men are using this time to create a more authoritarian state, where they don't have to worry about stupid things like people's opinions. Our intel from Russia tells us that their leader Savinkov is sick and is trying to revive the fight against us by removing defeatist. So I just gotta hope things work out in my favor over there with Savinkov croaking before killing all the people who want peace with me. Next, it's time to talk to the new British government about us leaving their island. The plan is to take them for all they got in reparations, but unsurprisingly, they don't want to do this. And you know, I guess it is really weird to extort a former ally like that, so I go easy on them and let them have some freedom. I wasn't gonna let them take my kindness as weakness though. With our share of the captured Cyniclus Navy, we towed them to the Indian Ocean and detonated a nuke on them to flex on the Accord. Germany stocks continued to rise in June when it seemed Savinkov had disappeared from the public view. We can only speculate what happened to him, but this will make working with the Russians a lot easier since they don't have someone constantly rallying the people to kill us. Next in the news, the North American Trade Organization forms as a way to isolate the American Union state economically, and I really just don't get the logic here. Canada is deliberately antagonizing a nation that should be able to kill them straight up in a war. It feels like a super nationalistic Canadian wrote this whole region with how powerful they think that country is, because it really doesn't make sense why it's 1948 and the longest haven't united the country. I have to debate a law on the Reichstag, and it all involves just clicking these decisions with no thought until people support me. But finally, I think I could do something when I get the news of a revolt brewing in Madagascar, but I'm actually not allowed to do anything to help. I just gotta sit on the sidelines and watch the Middle Africa have all the fun. Then the Syrian civil war started, and the most surprising thing about it was that somehow Palestine and Israel left peacefully while being completely chill with each other. All the fighting was just between the fascist Syrians and the socialist ones, and I wasn't allowed to come in on either side. Once again, sitting in the no content chair, but I didn't have to be sad for too much longer when the Chinese civil war ignited, followed by news of a massacre of protesters in Cologne. Reichskanzler Bradau couldn't let some noisy protesters ruin Germany's path to recovery, so he went into the city to deal with the chaos himself. Once there, he tried to calm the people down with some speeches, but didn't go very well. So he talked with the mayor and a curfew was put on the city, but that wasn't enough, because when driving through the city, poor Bradau was heavily wounded in an ambush on his convoy. He died shortly afterward, and I had to pick a successor. I didn't know any of these people, so I just kinda picked randomly and hoped for the best. Pulpits turned out to know what he was doing because he sat down with the leaders of the Cologne protest and worked out all the issues. Also, without me doing anything, Russia just gave back most of the land they took in the last war to Lithuania and Ukraine. I just don't understand why. After 7 years of fighting for that land, they just hand it back 2 years later without even asking anything in return from me. Can you imagine how the soldiers who fought on that front feel right now? I'm finally able to have a bit of fun in China now since I'm able to send a volunteer division there. But not too much because, surprisingly, the average Chinese peasant doesn't have a counter to my main battle tanks. The only good divisions are the ones the Entente sends, and I can just go around them easily and kill them. I can also just flood the Beijing government with equipment so the Guangzhou will never be able to come back. Germany is not just winning in China, but in Africa too when we get news that Middle Africa crushed the uprising in Madagascar. All I gotta do is keep up the momentum in China and it's curtains for them. Splitting the country in half by taking Guangzhou, I'm sure just devastates them. Plus, looking at the lend-lease Beijing is getting from me and my allies, I really don't know how Guangzhou was supposed to compete with the breadcrumbs the Entente is throwing them. In 1950, everything is coming together for the new state. I'm able to click the final decision and the final law, oh god. I'm not pronouncing that, is put up to a vote, but we already know the outcome. It passes, and now the government no longer needs to worry about the legislative branch. The libs have finally been owned for good. Kaiser Wilhelm III is pleased about the news. For him, Germany is now the utopia that his father couldn't accomplish. But the biggest surprise to me was that it actually all worked out fine. There were some events about the left yapping about the destruction of democracy, but they didn't actually do anything about it to stop me, so kudos to Kalterkrieg on their realistic portrayal of the political left. Trouble was brewing soon, not from anything I did in Germany of course, but in Middle Africa. There was a dossier sent to the press about the stuff we were doing in the African uranium mines, and well, wasn't good stuff. It was a good thing China ended in a W for us soon afterwards because I was expecting some stuff to pop off in Middle Africa. I had to pick some new leadership for the colony and hope that new guy could fix the dumpster fire, but then nothing happened and there was nothing to do, so I was pretty bored. So bored that I just was staring at the Syrian Civil War again and trying to make something happen since the borders haven't moved at all. And I gave the fascists a bunch of equipment. To their credit, when my lend-lease arrived, the fascists started attacking. Then I noticed I was missing out on the party in Morocco, so I made sure to get in on the fun with a large present and tank division. It was another proxy war between the Reichs and Accord's Goon Squad, but I can't help but feel this war, just like in China, is super stacked against the Accord. As soon as I start getting involved, the fight's pretty much over. And I didn't even have to do that much, I just took control of the empty land while my AI allies did the hard work of taking the cities. At this point, I'm wondering what I'm even doing here. Can't do anything in Syria, and the wars I could intervene in were pushovers, but eventually, I see an event for the Accord doing naval exercises in the Atlantic, and I could send a submarine to monitor them. I'm excited because I know something big is about to happen. Our scout submarine was spotted and told to sail off, but I wasn't gonna let nothing happen, so I stuck around. Then they tried to intimidate the sub with signal charges, so I was faced with a tough decision. With the way this event is worded, surfacing the sub is the obvious choice to make the nothing ever happens people lose for once. But it turns out that was actually me backing down because placeholder. Nothing ever happens bros won again. I couldn't let that stand. I ran back the save to redo the event chain because I wanted to do something. This time, I told the sub to withdraw, but I swear they coded the event wrong because this event reads like it was meant to trigger after you told the sub to surface and surrender. Still, war was brewing and I was ready to have some fun with the Accord. But then, they just backed down to me and war was completely avoided. Nothing ever happens bros really just won again in both scenarios. I'm actually upset. All I can do now is just watch the Syrian AI suicide a division into a mountain. I gave them all the equipment just for them to use it like this. But the mod then teases me with possible content again with an event about Wilhelm III getting sick. He dies pretty soon afterward, and I'm expecting a shakeup in German politics soon. But what actually shakes up is our status in Africa, apparently. Middle Africa just finished negotiations for decolonization, and I'm just feeling like there was someone they forgot to ask. I picked one leader for the colony, and he just went and ended our African colonial empire behind my back. Very cool. Kaiser Wilhelm IV had his coronation soon afterward and began his speech to address the new empire. But what should have been a simple speech took a sharp turn when he started talking about how he wanted women to be able to vote and inherit property. Many politicians were in disbelief. Their new Kaiser was woke. The new state that I spent the first part of the game creating was being used against the conservatives to push through liberal reforms. Our colony in Namibia wanted to join Germany proper, and Willie IV just killed that. The current Reichskanzler Poffids resigned, and Willie appointed his own guy. Then he changed the succession law so his daughter could become a Kaiser, and we got a new political branch for our focus tree. You'd think that means something was gonna happen, but I think you know the drill by now. We have a timer to implement women's suffrage, right? That just disappears. I assume this political tree is about establishing our legitimacy in the government, but it doesn't matter because the opposition isn't shown to be doing anything. Our former colony in East Africa has an attempted coup, and when I check out Tanganyika, I have to start asking questions about what is going on here. Who is running this government? The German colonists must be super progressive, having an African field marshal and letting him run the government with the military. Later, a war sparks between Congo and Katanga, and I'm supposed to support Katanga while Congo is supported by the Accord. And this would be the only time I struggled because the war is set up so blatantly in Congo's favor. I dumped a bunch of equipment on them and sent a tank division, but surprisingly Rommel's tank division wasn't doing so well in the Congolese jungles, so I couldn't do much pushing. Hopefully the next Lend-Lease with airplanes would turn it around for them. Meanwhile, in America, New England made a bold move in seizing Pennsylvania from the American Union state, and surely taking this valuable land would obviously be met with a violent response from the AUS, right? Don't make me tap the sign again. You already know what's gonna happen. The Union State just takes it on the chin and sits there like there is nothing we can do. To try to put things in Katanga's favor, I have Rommel make a super aggressive push, but unfortunately, that blows up in my face, with the tank getting cut off from behind. Now I lost a really good tank division and a good chunk of the Katangan forces. I sent a mountaineer to hold the line for them, but I'm just delaying the inevitable at this point because the Katangans have no manpower to reinforce their units. I couldn't go back to not having anything to do, so I just tagged to Katanga to up their manpower loss so I could keep the war going. They regained strength in their divisions, and with a mechanized division, I pushed for them to surround a Congolese unit. But I could only fight the Congolese. The Accord units were like brick walls. But back to the Americas, there was finally something else interesting happening, with Argentina and Brazil in a full-on war with each other. Finally, I'm allowed to have some proper fun since this is a major war and I can send a bunch of volunteers to help out. Once I arrive, it isn't even close though. The tanks run over everything the Brazilians in Accord can throw at me. I just battle planned them and the Brazilians folded immediately. It only took 2 months after my tanks got to the front line to make the Brazilians surrendered. So that was it, my breadcrumb of fun in the Americas. I'm gonna be real, I feel like some major changes need to be made to this mod's lore because this setup ain't it. I just don't get how, when you have complete control over what the teams will look like, you make a Cold War mod where one side is just so blatantly more powerful than the other. I'm supposed to believe that Canada, a war-torn UK, and southern France are able to mount a credible threat to Germany's sphere of influence. So, I'm super bored right now, and it doesn't look like anything else is gonna happen since I'm already 6 years into the mod. I just declare war on the Accord with cheats because I want to actually play this game. The AI instantly nuked Berlin because I didn't set up anything for this war. I'm just straight raw dogging it. I've barely changed the production lines and starting templates. This is basically the beginning German army, and I'm not recruiting any extra men for this. The first thing I have to do is get revenge for Berlin. Then I have to reunite France under my leadership. I will give the Accord credit, they had way more planes than me, but it wasn't enough to stop my mechanized and tank divisions rolling through the French countryside. The Accord tried to do naval invasions elsewhere to take my attention away from the south, but the only attention they got was German soldiers laughing at their horrible plan. With southern France gone, the back of the Accord armies was broken in Europe, so I could just drive through Spain and Italy with little issues and kill them. And of course, since I have such a large fleet, it was no issue to get naval superiority in the English Channel. I cared so little about my army, I just launched my tanks into the English countryside and hoped for the best. They had barely enough supply to take a port, and with that done, it was curtains for the UK. I could just flood in a bunch of mech and tank divisions that the UK and Accord had no chance of stopping. So once they were capitulated, all I had to do was kill Canada and New England. Sadly, the AI couldn't even make this part difficult because they moved their fleet and allowed me to launch the invasion with just submarine escorts. That poor Canadian garrison didn't stand a chance against all these mech divisions and melted quickly, giving us a landing in North America. Despite not having an air force here, my mechanized are able to make a solid beachhead in Halifax as they waited for reinforcements to cross the Atlantic. The Accord is just helpless against me now, even with their air supremacy, because they don't have the courage to nuke their own land to stop me. When my backup arrives, the remainder of their armies collapse, and that's pretty much it for any hope of stopping German hegemony in the world. Since this campaign is over, I'll summarize my thoughts on Kalterkrieg. You could probably already tell, didn't really like it that much. Now, it's one thing to be buggy and light on content, that could be somewhat expected for an alpha release, but I feel a nation that is supposedly fully playable should have a lot more going for it. Sure, they can always add more content in the future, however, I think the biggest problem I have with Kalterkrieg is the setting. They shot themselves in the foot with how they positioned the world for an Entente versus Reichspakt Cold War. Germany and its faction is just so blatantly more powerful, it doesn't make a very compelling scenario, and it doesn't even have to be the case. I don't like just criticizing though because I know it's hard to create, so here's what I would have done instead. First off, I think starting in 1948 was a mistake. It should have been way earlier, like 1944. Because it doesn't make sense that the Third Internationale was able to last 7 years in a war. Britain, France, and Russia were hurting real bad after 4 years of World War I, and they controlled a bunch more land to draw from. But when they're in a weaker state, they somehow last longer? There's no way this war makes it past 1944. France should just be fully united under the Entente to buff up their strength. Also, the American lore doesn't make that much sense either, with why it's so divided in 1948. I honestly think it should be united under MacArthur's rule, who is promising to step down for elections, and then you got the Accord and Reich fighting for influence over the country. Feel like there's a lot of potential for USA pass with that setup. Anyways, that's all I could really think of at the top of my head. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. If you made it this far, you are obligated to leave a like, or else I will give your city the London special. Special shout out to my alumni for generously funding me on Patreon. You guys are my strongest soldiers. What would be your perfect Hoi 5 game? For me, I'd like a more realistic economy in the game. I think it's pretty silly how any nation can quickly become able to go toe-to-toe with a superpower, so it'd be cool if there was a new economic system in place that could limit a country's military and make them have a more realistic build-up. More content to come soon, so subscribe to catch the next video, and I hope to see you again.